The 7th generation of video games saw the uprising of the over-the-shoulder cover-based third-person shooter. Their quality varied from title to title, but usually they were plodding, slow-paced affairs that had you sitting around waiting for the opportunity to pop out behind bits of rubble to cap a fall. Ironic that the supposedly exciting action games these shooters set out to be a lot of the time were deriving their over-the-shoulder shooting style from Resident Evil 4, a game that had pretensions of being a slow-paced spook-em-up. Because when the director of Resi 4, Shinji Mikami, decided to make his own action shooter that wasn't also trying to be a horror game, this was not the pace he went for. It's been 7 years since the rocket-propelled, adrenaline-infused Vanquish launched on consoles, and now finally it makes its debut on the PC with the unlocked frame rate it was meant for. Earlier this year we also got a PC port of Bayonetta, and while it was satisfying to see it go from its original unstable 60 frames per second to a rock-solid PC 60 frames per second, seeing the 720p badly texture-filtered, unstable 30 FPS console game Vanquish was become this titan, with an unlocked frame rate and unlocked resolution on the PC is breathtaking. The first time I booted it up, it really did feel like I was playing a whole new game. The textures from the original pop out and shine way more with this new crystal clear picture. But of course, just a heads up, I don't expect YouTube's bitrate to keep up with this game, so no matter what you see in this video, just be assured, the game looks great. Not only that, but Vanquish as a shooter also benefits from being playable with a mouse and keyboard. The fast-paced action is now complemented by the lightning-quick precision of a mouse pointer. It's an awesome port of an old game, but for those of you who maybe don't know much about Vanquish, let me get down to the nitty-gritty. Shinji Mikami wanted to make Vanquish to create a game with the style of the old 70s anime Kashern, which was a show about a cool android boy and his robot dog who go around beating the shit out of robots. But since he had already directed the beat-em-up God Hand, he decided instead to use the framework of a shooter to bring to life his idea, while keeping a sense of speed and fast-paced action. Though the robot dog unfortunately never made it out of the concept phase. To that end of creating a fast shoot-em-up, we have protagonist ex-American football player Sam Gideon's augmented reaction suit, which allows him to touch down his way across the battlefield at super high speeds while also slowing down time. Usually after dodge rolling, vaulting over cover, after a melee attack, or while doing that tubular slide. Note that boost sliding and slowing time pulls from the same resource bar, and when it runs out you'll be caught with your pants around your ankles, forced to wait for a cooldown process. This is where the main strategy of Vanquish comes into play, timing and managing your suit's heat bar to get in and around the battlefield as quickly as possible while devastating your enemies with precision slow-mo attacks. This is a cover shooter where taking cover should be your last resort. Here the skilled player can be out in the battlefield dancing with enemies without even touching cover. This all feels fairly well balanced, the only area where it's a bit unforgiving is the melee. These are some of the most fun attacks in the game, power sliding into a foe and then raining death from above. The thing is, a melee attack that makes contact with the enemy will completely drain your energy gauge and leave you stranded needing to recharge. It's a really big punishment for going for the melee attack, and if you trigger slow-mo after it's done, well, there's no reason not to make use of it until your energy bar drains, because in a moment it's going to be drained anyway. Perhaps the melee moves could have been nerfed in exchange for not losing your entire boost gauge upon use. Then maybe there could have been an option to use more gauge in a follow-up slow-mo attack or to conserve it. Otherwise though, there's a lot of opportunity here for creative gameplay. Bounce off one enemy and shoot a bunch of others on the come down. Throw a grenade and vault over cover to shoot at it at the right time. Ever had trouble in a shooter throwing grenades at flying targets? How about chucking your grenade, slowing time, and then triggering it at just the right moment to ensure maximum blast radius? If you do wind up behind cover, hey, smoke a fag and distract your automaton enemies with it. Slide into a wall and bounce off it to trigger an aerial attack, etc. The score system is a bit mediocre though in terms of rating your style, ranking you with a more traditional hack and slash grade when it comes to time, kills, ratio of cover used. I think would be a little more easy to interpret when it comes to gauging your skill in a level, rather than this points tally. Did I do good? I mean, I got this many points, but you know, what is that relative to? How about some bonus upgrades to incentivize stylish play? Come on, Platinum, we've done this before. Looking at Vanquish at the moment, I see way more potential to be explored here for further in-depth gameplay. Well, what you have here certainly beats out the likes of most third-person shooters. I see so many more venues of possibility for this gameplay. Yeah, I know you guys just made this amazing new third-person shooter combat system, but could you just do a little more for me, just saying? The levels are pretty confined. You're trapped in enclosed spaces with lots of invisible walls, and while there are slopes here and there to mix things up, you're always dealing with very regimented spaces. They may look different, but a lot of the time it essentially feels like playing in a bunch of cubic level boundaries with set dressing. You can't just run off a ladder in gameplay, you have to hit a prompt to get off them. When I see the level's invisible parameters in my third eye more than the actual drawn-in walls in the level in a game about movement, I feel a little restricted and that there's more that could have been done with the environments. I've played games where it's way worse, but I can't help but feel like in Vanquish specifically, the levels should be less confining. I mean, look at a game like Dark Souls where you're just tumbling off buildings and rolling through crates everywhere. Imagine just clattering through a bunch of destructible objects while careening across a level. Let the ragdolls of defeated foes get caught on me as I fly around. There's no dedicated jump button, and I think with just the addition of something like that while lifting the restrictions placed on each level's strict boundaries, the gameplay could be taken to a whole new level. Speeding up and launching into the air to rain fire from above in more versatile ways than just finagling yourself up there all cheeky with the melee kick. Maybe variable terrain a little more accessible to play around with. I want to see Sam Gideon launching himself off walls, wall running to mount an offensive, bouncing between buildings and low-hanging signposts and debris to cause chaos all over the place. I never felt like Vanquish was all that varied environment-wise. Plants and street signs may delineate different sections of each part of the massive space station the entire game takes place in, but you can't ever really visually escape the grey walls and paneling that remind you you're always in a big grey cylinder. Vanquish has really fun gameplay, but at times it seems almost at odds with how serious and sort of standard the rest of the set dressing is. Oh, don't get me wrong, some of the environments that are here for a giant grey space station are impressive, samey throughout, yet appropriately epic in places. But stuff like the premise, story, and the score feels like it was made for a way more generic war shooter than this. First off, music is serviceable, nice action, techno beats, got me pumped enough, but this is an area where the game could have experimented and excelled way more. We're dealing with a product inspired by old 70s anime, retro sci-fi. I think there was room to get a little more out there with the score. Provide some old school funky jams to complement the gameplay. A dude like Sam, it wouldn't have shocked me for him to have some kind of MP3 player in his suit he installed to headbang to while ruining everyone around him. Vanquish feels like a dance to play, get some groovy jazzy jigs up in here. Everything doesn't need to be a vibrating, thumping techno beat. The premise you're involved in also doesn't seem entirely suited to the one-man army feel of the gameplay. Sam is saddled with this commander and his platoon of marine boys who you constantly have to wait around for and save on the battlefield. I wouldn't be against a few segments like this to show off just how badass you are in comparison to everybody else, but the fact that it's most of the game doesn't mesh with the otherwise bombastic solo fashion Sam tears through his enemies with. Like, imagine if you were playing Revengeance and every level had a bunch of B-squad cops ineffectually punching the enemies in every room with you. It would take something away from the one-man struggle you as the player are locked in with the villains of that world. The cutscenes don't really accomplish much. There's some action and they look pretty expensive, but all they ever amount to is usually, here comes some robots, and occasionally Sam will get mad at the army commander guy for disregarding the lives of his soldiers. Other Platinum games do a pretty good job of using their detailed cutscenes to show off some action, but also maybe to tell us more about a character's backstory, the villain's motivation, explain the culture and state of the world. Here something totes epic might happen in a cutscene, but for what? Usually just for Sam to get to the next vague objective, like access the command tower or rescue some faceless soldiers.
Yeah boys, we did it, we blew it up, oh yeah, we
The signal's no longer being jammed. Well done.
We unjammed the signal.
Alright, let's get these troop transports on the ground and head for the central building!
And after this great success against the forces of evil, I guess we're gonna go to some place to do something. We've really come a long way in the last few hours of game. Imagine if these scenes had been used to, say, set up a ragtag team of villains you're gonna go up against throughout the game whose asses the title just makes you want to kick the hell out of. There are some really cool boss fights in the game, but it would have added much more character to the world if they were like some devious dudes working for the one crazy Russian villain guy who's in charge of the robot armada. I feel like the lack of this kind of stuff just stands out in Vanquish now that so many games do this, like even Titanfall 2 did. Top this off with an inconclusive kind of downer of an ending, and this all just stops Vanquish from feeling like a legendary self-contained action title like your Devil May Cry or your Bayonetta. But all my grievances in the case of Vanquish just push me towards wanting to see a follow-up even more. There's so much potential to take what's here, build on it, and make an amazing complete package. Add more mechanics to the gameplay, have a more rounded story with a larger cast of characters and more triumphant moments. Make the Uncharted 2 to this game's Uncharted 1, if you will. If anything, with this nicely priced PC port, I hope people do give Vanquish another try and encourage Platinum to continue what they started here. When it clicks, when you're in the battle and you pull off that perfect sweep of a field, you can feel what a shooter can be at its best. Vanquish does go a long way accomplishing what it set out to do and gives you one hell of an adrenaline-filled time. It's just a shame it overheats a little too quickly before it can really reach that status of classic.